This is a video tutorial of reading the first Aliyah of the first triennial cycle for Parashat Kedoshim, corresponding to Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 through 4. This is also a recording not just of the reading, but of the reading with the TROPE as well. And there is a 5-step version to this process. The first step is we will be practicing the words on the vowel and the TROPE side in order to get you some experience simply in reading the words and also in singing them with the TROPE. And then we're going to be transferring that over to the Torah side. So in this first step, I'm going to be reading through each of the lines and then saying the word pause when I'd like you to pause the video and practice what we just read to yourself. After this step, we will then, after we do this first step of just doing each phrase by phrase, verse by verse, we'll then go back and then do the whole thing do the whole selection at once. And then we will do that again on the Torah side. The third step will be to add the vowels, to add the TROPE, and then to do the whole thing on the Torah side. And then the final step will be to see it as you would actually see it in the Torah. And without further ado, we'll begin with step 1, which is to practice the words simply on the vowel side. And remember, when I say pause, I'd like you to pause the video and repeat what I say. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Pause. Now we're on to verse 2. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Pause. Continuing. Ve'amarta alehem. Pause. Continuing. Kedoshim tihiyu. Pause. Continuing. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to read verse 2 all together. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to do verses 1 and 2 together. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Pause. Sorry, that was my mistake. We're going to read verses 1 and 2 together. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause to read verses 1 and 2 together. Now we're going to continue with verse 3. I'm going to break it up in the middle, and so we can just focus on verse 3. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u. Pause. Continuing. Ve'et shabtotai tishmoru. Pause. Continuing. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to read verse 3 in its entirety. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabtotai tishmoru, ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to read verses 1, 2, and 3 together. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabtotai tishmoru, ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to read verse 4, breaking it up so that we can learn the verse better. Al tifnu el ha-elilim, velohei masecha. Pause. Continuing. Lo ta'asu lachem. Pause. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now all of verse 4 together. Al tifnu el ha-elilim velohei masecha. Lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to practice all of from verse 1 through verse 4 together. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabtotai tishmoru, ani Adonai Elohechem. Al tifnu el ha-elilim velohei masecha. Lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to transfer the reading from the vowel side and TROPE side to the Torah side. This is a version of what it would look like in the Torah from when you would have to be reading it on the day of your reading. And just like we did for the vowel side, I'm going to be reading the words first broken up within each verse in order to better learn that verse, and then the verse as a whole to learn that verse again, and then to read all the verses that we had already learned together in order to practice reading the entire thing as one unit. And so we'll begin with verse 1. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Pause. Now we'll continue with verse 2. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Pause. Continuing. Ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu. Pause. Continuing. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now all of verse 2 together. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verses 1 and 2 together. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verse 3 broken up. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u. Pause. Continuing. Ve'et shabtotai tishmoru. Pause. Continuing. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now all of verse 3 together. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u ve'et shabtotai tishmoru ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verses 1 through 3 together. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u ve'et shabbatotai tishmoru ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verse 4 broken up. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha. Pause. Continuing. Lo ta'asu lachem. Pause. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now all of verse 4 together. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha. Lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now the entire Torah reading together, beginning from verse 1. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabbatotai tishmoru, ani Adonai Elohechem. Al tifnu el ha'elilim, velohe masecha, lo ta'asu lachem, ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now we're going to go back to, for step 3, back to the vowel side and the TROPE side, and to be singing it with the correct tunes of the TROPE. What I'd like you to do as we read through it, I want you to pay attention to some of the TROPE that repeats itself. For instance, this phrase is Vaydaber Adonai. This phrase is Ve'amarta Alehem. And there are similar like phrases throughout, which you can tell because they share the same TROPE notes, which either appear at the bottom like this or at the top like this. And so you can pay attention as we go through again, beginning with verse 1. Remember, after when I pause it, for you to pause your screen and then to practice it, and then once you feel ready, to go on to the next part. Verse 1. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Pause. Now verse 2 broken up. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Pause. Continuing. Ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu. Pause. Continuing. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verses 1 and 2 together. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 3 broken up. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u. Pause. Continuing. Ve'et shabbatotai tishmoru. Pause. Continuing. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verses 1 through 3 together. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael, ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et Shabbatotai tishmoru ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verse 4 broken up. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha lo ta'asu lachem ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. I realized that I did not do that broken up, and so I'm going to break it up this time. And we've already done it as one whole verse, and so after this time of it, all the words being broken up, we're going to start from verse 1 through verse 4. But now verse 4 broken up. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha. Pause. Lo, continuing. Lo ta'asu lachem. Pause. Continuing. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now from verse 1 through verse 4. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u ve'ed shabbatotai tishmoru ani Adonai Elohechem. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha lo ta'asu lachem ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Step 4. Transferring the reading to the Torah side with no vowels and no TROPE. Verse 1. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Pause. Verse 2 in divided. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael. Pause. Continued. Ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu. Pause. Continued. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 2 in its entirety. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verse 1 and verse 2 together. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 3, divided in chunks. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u. Pause. Continue. Ve'et shabtotai tishmoru. Pause. Continue. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 3 now in its entirety. Ish ima ve'aviv tira'u ve'ed shabbatotai tishmoru. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now verses 1 through 3. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish ima ve'aviv tira'u ve'ed shabtotai tishmoru. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 4. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha. Pause. Continue. Lo ta'asu lachem. Pause. Continue. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Verse 4 now in its entirety. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now the entire Torah section from verses 1 through 4 in its entirety. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish ima ve'aviv tira'u ve'ed shabtotai tishmoru. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohe masecha lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Pause. Now you'll have a chance to sing along with your Torah portion as it appears in the actual Torah scroll which you will be reading from. 3. The first Aliyah of Parashat Kedoshim, according to the first third of the Triennial cycle, Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 to 4. Amen. Vaidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael
Ve'amarta alehem kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabtotai tishmoru, ani Adonai Elohechem. Al tifnu el ha'elilihim ve'lohei masecha lo ta'asu lachem. Ani Adonai Elohechem.